Well, it's a great honor to be here. It seems to have fallen to me and my colleagues, Christopher and Dan, to argue against God in what I am now told is the most religious state in your nation. I'm encouraged by the show of hands here. I just want to assure those of you who are religious here that our purpose is not to offend you this morning, but I will nevertheless repay your hospitality by telling you exactly what I think about religion. Now, as someone who spent the last 2 years criticizing religious faith, I've become quite familiar with how people of faith rise to the defense of God. As it turns out, there are not 100 ways of doing this. There appear to be just 3. Either you argue that a specific religion is true, or you argue that religion is useful, or you attack atheism as intolerant, elitist, or otherwise corrosive of basic human values. Now, the only line of argument that is relevant to this debate, or indeed any debate about the validity of religion, is an argument that religion is true. Or rather, that one religion is true, because of course they can't all be true. In fact, our opponents here stand for 2 distinct and mutually incompatible faiths. Was Jesus Christ the Messiah? The rabbi and Dinesh are not likely to agree on that point. As Bertrand Russell pointed out over 100 years ago, even if we knew one of the Earth's religions was true, perfectly true, given the multiplicity of faiths, given their mutual incompatibility, all believers should expect damnation purely as a matter of probability. But before I go deeper into this issue of religion's truth, I just want to illustrate how confused a person must be to argue that it is reasonable to believe in God because religion is useful, because it gives life meaning, because it makes people more moral than they otherwise would be, as the rabbi suggested, because it makes people happy, any of the benefits you could imagine of religion. Okay, imagine you're walking down the street and you run into an old friend, and he looks radiantly happy. You ask him what's going on in his life, and he tells you that everything changed for him the day he realized that he was destined to marry Angelina Jolie. It might occur to you to ask, why does he believe this? I mean, Angelina Jolie is, after all, one of the most beautiful and famous people on the planet. She's not incidentally married to Brad Pitt. They have something like 27 children at this point. Okay, what if your friend, sensing your skepticism, said, "You clearly don't understand. This belief gives my life meaning. Okay, I now know my purpose in life. It's to be Angelina's husband." What if your friend said that this belief has made me a better person? I'm now incredibly kind to children, anticipating having to raise Angelinas once Brad leaves. Or what if your friend said to you, "You can believe whatever you want, but I wouldn't want to live in a universe where I don't marry Angelina Jolie." Okay, it should be quite clear at this point that your friend has lost his mind. Okay, and it's probably a dangerous person, and yet this is precisely the kind of talk that so often passes for wisdom in religious circles and may attempt to pass for wisdom here. Certainly the morality argument is of that sort. Beliefs are not like clothing. Okay? Comfort and utility and attractiveness cannot be our conscious criteria for adopting them. To believe a proposition, you have to believe that you have good reasons for believing it. And the effect that this belief will have on your life cannot be among those reasons. And this is what it is to be clouded by bias. This is why we have phrases like wishful thinking and self-deception. To really believe that there is a God is also to believe that you stand in some relation to his existence, such that if he didn't exist, you wouldn't believe in him. How does the supposed usefulness of religion fit into this scheme? It doesn't. So let's return to this question of truth. It's very common for people to say there's no conflict between religion and science because they relate to different subject matters. Okay, this is a lie. Religion and science both make claims about the way the world is. They make incompatible claims about the same reality, and they make these claims based on very different standards of evidence and modes of argument. It should be quite clear that there's a conflict, a perfect conflict, between demanding good evidence for what you believe and being satisfied with bad evidence. or no evidence. So religion and science are in conflict because there's no way to disentangle religious and scientific truth claims. The claim that Jesus was born of a virgin, say, it's a central claim to Christianity. It is also a claim about biology. The claim that he rose from the dead and will return to earth is a claim about history. It's a claim about the human survival of death. It's a claim apparently about human flight without the aid of technology. Jews, Christians, and Muslims, while they disagree on many things, all agree that on the day of judgment, every person who has ever lived will be physically resurrected. Just which scientific laws does this violate? One's tempted to say all of them. If the basic claims of religion are true, science is so blind to this underlying reality, and the laws of nature are so susceptible to supernatural modification as to render the whole enterprise of science ridiculous. If, on the other hand, the basic claims of religion are false, most of the people on this planet are profoundly confused about the nature of reality and beset by quite irrational hopes and fears. And many people are simply wasting their lives and spreading delusion, often with tragic results. It seems to me no thinking person can be indifferent between the two sides of this dichotomy. Now, it's often imagined that non-believers like myself must be in principle closed to spiritual life. This is not true. You can have a deep spiritual and ethical life without lying to yourself or to your children about the nature of reality, without pretending to know things you do not know. There's nothing that prevents a non-believer from experiencing ecstasy and self-transcending love and rapture and awe. In fact, there's nothing that prevents a non-believer from going into a cave and practicing meditation for a year like a proper mystic. What non-believers don't tend to do is make unjustified and unjustifiable claims about the nature of the cosmos and about the divine origin of certain books on the basis of those experiences. That is a difference worth noticing. So I want to suggest to you that whatever is true about our circumstance, ethically and spiritually, can be discovered now and can be talked about in language compatible with our growing scientific understanding of the world and of the human mind. Whatever discoveries are there to be made about how to maximize human well-being can be talked about in language that is not an outright affront to all that we've come to know in the last 2,000 years. And to subscribe to one of the Iron Age religions, like Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, is to make the tacit claim that that is impossible, that there is, in fact, no way to understand our circumstance using the tools of our modern understanding of the world, that some measure of superstition is necessary, some measure of mythology, that we have to lie just this much. The point is, we can place our confidence only in human conversation. And the question is, do you want to place it in a 21st century conversation where we have all of the world's literature and learning available to us? Or do you want to place it in a first century conversation or a 7th century conversation as preserved in one of our holy books? Thank you very much. Well, as we've begun to see, one of the problems with arguing in defense of God is that the evidence in your favor is either terrible or non-existent. And what we've heard from the other side and from the middle is that science is so complicated and counterintuitive and obviously incomplete that this leaves room for the God of Abraham. Okay, that's basically the argument, that the scientists don't understand everything. We don't understand how the first complex molecules self-assembled. Indeed, we don't. Scientists are the first to admit when they don't know. So the arrogance is very much on the side of those who would put their Iron Age faiths in the place of genuine scientific ignorance. Now, the other side has been playing hide the ball with the articles of faith. Okay, let's be very clear about this. I will speak about Christianity specifically just for ease. Christianity is based on the notion that the gospel account of the miracles of Jesus is true. Okay, this is what you have to reject Christianity. You don't have to prove the universe to be absent of God. You don't have to, in the same way that you don't have to go find that Poseidon or Zeus or any of the thousands of other dead gods are absent from the universe. With Christianity, it is a textual claim about the veracity of the Bible. Consider what this amounts to. Bible scholars agree that the first Gospels were written decades after the life of Jesus. Decades. And of course, we don't have the original manuscripts. We have copies of copies of copies of ancient Greek manuscripts which have thousands, literally thousands of discrepancies between them, many of which show signs of later interpolation, which is to say that people added passages that then became part of the canon. There are whole books of the canon, like the book of Revelation, which for hundreds of years were not included because they were deemed false gospel. There are other whole books, like the Shepherd of Hermas, which you probably haven't heard of, but for centuries it was considered part of the canon and then was later jettisoned as false gospel. Generations of Christians lived and died being guided by gospel that is now deemed both incomplete and mistaken. Think about that. So this process, this all too human process of cobbling together the supposed authoritative word of God, is a very precarious basis to assert the claims of Christianity. But the truth is, even if we had multiple contemporaneous claims of the miracles of Jesus, this would not be good enough, because miracle stories abound even in the 21st century. The devotees of the South Indian guru Satya Sai Baba ascribe all of the miracles of Jesus to him. He reads minds, he foretells the future, he raises the dead, he was born of a virgin. Okay, Satya Sai Baba is not a fringe figure. You might not have heard of him, but they had a birthday party for him a few years ago, and 1 million people showed up. There are vast numbers of people who think he's a living God. Okay, so Christianity is predicated on the claim that miracle stories, exactly of the kind that today surround a person like Satya Sai Baba, become especially credible when you place them in the pre-scientific religious context of the first century Roman Empire, decades after their supposed occurrence, as attested to by copies of copies of copies of ancient Greek and largely discrepant manuscripts. We have Satya Sai Baba's miracle stories attested to by thousands upon thousands of living eyewitnesses, and they don't even merit an hour on cable television. And yet you put a few miracle stories in an ancient book, and half the people on earth think it a legitimate project to organize their lives around them. Does anyone else see a problem with that? Well, I want to return to this core issue, which is belief, because that really is the issue. Without belief, religion evaporates. Without belief, science evaporates. We're talking about claims and their evidence. We're talking about what you think is true about the nature of the universe. Presumably you don't believe in Zeus. If someone stood here and said Zeus was the greatest scientist, you would not have applauded. Okay, let's talk honestly about what we think is true. The truth is that religion, as we speak of it, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, is based on the claim that God dictates certain books. He doesn't code software, he doesn't produce films, he doesn't score symphonies, he is an author. And this claim has achieved credibility because these books are deemed so profound that they could not possibly have been written by human authors. Please consider for a moment how differently we treat scientific claims and texts and discoveries. Isaac Newton went into isolation for 18 months, starting in the year 1665. When he came out of his solitude, he had invented the calculus. He had discovered the laws of motion and universal gravitation. He had single-handedly created the field of optics. No one thinks that this was anything other than a man's labor. And it took 200 years of continuous ingenuity on the part of some of the smartest people who ever lived to substantially improve upon Newton's work. How difficult would it be to improve the Bible? Anyone in this room could improve this supposedly inerrant text scientifically, historically, ethically, spiritually, in moments. If God loves us and wanted to guide us with a book of morality, it's very strange to have given us a book that supports slavery, that demands that we murder people for imaginary crimes like witchcraft. The true basis for hope in our world is open-ended conversation, and religion has shattered our world into competing moral communities. What we have to convince ourselves of is that love and curiosity is enough for us, and intellectual honesty is the guardian of that.